In today's lesson, we're going to be exploring the lesson question on the screen, scholars. It says, what are the differences between Hinduism and Buddhism? Let's go ahead and get started with this lesson. Our main lesson goal today, which I know we're going to achieve, is to learn about Hinduism and Buddhism. And in order to succeed at this goal, we first need to explain how the Aryan migration influenced Indian culture. Secondly, we need to be able to describe the development of the Hindu and Buddhist religions. And third and finally, we need to identify the beliefs of these two religions. And as we go through this lesson, I want you to keep your eyes open for these various words to know. Now these are all your domain-specific or your lesson-specific words. And those are caste, enlightened, karma, nirvana, reincarnation, and Vedas. Like I said, make sure you keep your eyes open for these words as we go through this lesson, and be sure to use that glossary if you need any help with their definitions throughout the lesson at any time. Go ahead and direct your attention to the lesson question, scholars. It's always at the top of the screen. It says, what are the, that's right, differences between Hinduism and Buddhism? In order to answer that question, we first want to look at the religion of Hinduism. And secondly, you guessed it, we're going to be looking at the religion of Buddhism. And by looking at both of these, we'll definitely be able to identify the differences between these two great world religions. But before we jump into Hinduism or Buddhism, let's take a look at a timeline as well as a map to try to figure out where these two world religions are located and where the predominant number of those people are living to this very day. Recall that a great tool that historians will use is a timeline. And this is a timeline of world religions, and you're really able to see when these world religions began. Starting with Judaism in 1800 BCE in the Middle East, as well as Christianity and Islam. Now, one thing that ties all of these religions at the bottom together are that they all began in the Middle East. But we're going to be focusing on the top here. And these religions began in India. It started with Hinduism, which began around 1500 BCE, and then almost 1,000 or a little more than 1,000 years later, you had the rise of Buddhism in India as well. Now let's look more graphically at these world religions, and this is a map of them, where you can see Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism and other traditional religions, and Judaism. But what I want to draw your attention to are these two colors, Hinduism and Buddhism. Now what you can see is, let's first try to find Hinduism. Can you spot it on the map? Not really in North America or South America. Do you see India? It's right here. There's India. Also, the small country of Nepal. The majority of people in that country or those countries are Hindus. How about Buddhism? Can you spot those on the map? Well, those are right here in Southeast Asia, as well as Mongolia. And the majority of the people in those countries are followers of Buddhism. So when we're speaking about Hinduism and Buddhism, I want you to keep this part of the world in your mind. Take a look at that lesson question again, scholars. It says, what are the differences between Hinduism and Buddhism? Well, you just saw a timeline that showed when Hinduism and Buddhism, as well as the other world religions, when they began. You also took a look at the map, and you were able to see where Hinduism and Buddhism, the main geographic area where the majority of their believers live to this day. Now, let's really get in to start answering this lesson question, and let's begin exploring the religion of Hinduism together. Let's get started. A people group from the modern-day area of Afghanistan in the Hindu Kush Mountains called the Aryans introduced Brahmanism into the Indian subcontinent. Now this religion of Brahmanism is based on a collection of sacred texts called the Vedas. And right here is a Vedic symbol right here. Now Brahmanism, the one introduced by the Aryans, is a polytheistic religion. Remember what polytheistic means? It's the belief in one god or many gods. Well, if you guessed many gods, great job. That's what it is. It's a belief in many gods. And it was actually a complex ritual that was led by the priests called the Brahmins. Another thing that the Aryans introduced was the idea of the caste system, which to this very day plays an integral role in India. Now, Brahmanism gradually became Hinduism, and it developed over a very long period of time. It wasn't just one day Brahmanism to Hinduism. It gradually became that over generation and generations. And scholars, they interpreted the Vedas in a series of texts called the Upanishads. And the Upanishads form the basis of the Hindu beliefs. However, we need to understand that these Hindu beliefs vary greatly. And here's what I'm talking about, is that it's very distinct, the characteristics of Hinduism. And they're also very complex, these different characteristics. Here's what I mean. One is that most Hindus recognize one supreme God. Two, they consider other deities as parts of that supreme God. And so because there's a supreme God, but then there are also other deities, Hinduism cannot be easily classified as monotheistic or polytheistic. It doesn't fall into one belief. Also, another characteristic of Hinduism is that there's not a father figure of Hinduism. You may have heard an earlier lesson about Judaism, and in Judaism, Abraham is the father, the first ever person who founded Judaism. And that's what we mean by, say, father figure, but Hinduism does not have a father of the modern day religion. So these are just some of the characteristics of Hinduism, scholars. We were just talking about how Hinduism does not fit in either a monotheistic or a polytheistic box, if you will. And this is why, because we're going to look at these Hindu gods. Now, the three main forms of the supreme Hindu god is called the Hindu triumvirate. Now, the triumvirate actually means are three powerful individuals. So many Hindus believe there is one main god, and he takes different forms. So that's how it could be monotheistic, or it could be thought of as polytheistic because of these different gods. So that's what we mean when we're talking about it could be polytheistic or monotheistic. But let's take a look at these different Hindu gods. To begin with, let's start over here. You have Vishnu, and she is the preserver and the protector of the world. And this god's job is to maintain balance in the world. The second is right here, and this is Brahma, the creator of the world. And it is believed that this god created the Vedas as well as the world. And the third and final Hindu god is Shiva. Now, Shiva is viewed as the destroyer and purifier of the world, and that Shiva is going to rid the world of evil. So these are the different Hindu gods. Now let's take a look at the different Hindu beliefs. Now, Hinduism follows three basic principles. The first is the idea of reincarnation. Now, reincarnation is the belief that one soul will be reborn into a new body after physical death. So many Hindus believe that once you die, you will come back, or you will be reincarnated as either another person or as an animal. So it could be both. The second is the idea of karma. Now, karma is the belief that every action causes a reaction in the universe, either good or negative. Can you see karma? Knowing what we know about karma, can you see it here? I'll give you a hint. This lady and this lady are the same people. What's happening here? Well, this lady is giving a gift. All right, so a good action. And if it causes a reaction, you can see that right now, the same lady is now receiving a gift from this gentleman right here. So that's the idea of karma. If you do good things will happen to you. If you do bad things will happen to you. Now, this idea of karma also has a basis in the caste system, which plays a huge role in India. The idea is that the lower castes are actually being punished for deeds that they did in a previous life. So if they were bad, if they broke a lot of laws, then they would reincarnate as a lower caste. Or if they did a lot of bad things, karma would cause them to enter a lower caste. Now, the third and final main Hindu belief is that there are multiple paths to God. Now, if there are multiple paths to God, you will find different worship practices. And Hindus believe that everyone worships in their own way. Again, back to that idea of multiple paths to God. Now, this worship, it can include temple worship. The picture over here is a temple to the god Shiva that we just learned about. There is a prayer to a shrine created at home. Interesting thing about Hinduism is that they do not go to the temple on a set day. So, for example, followers of Islam many times will go to their place of worship on a Friday. For Christians, it would be on a Sunday. For Hindus, not the same. They create it at home and they worship their gods when they want to. Also, the belief in meditation and yoga. And these are the belief or the encouragement of spiritual awareness, either through exercise or, like we said, through meditation. The big takeaway here that I really want you to understand is that Hinduism, like we've been saying, is a very complex religion. And always keep that in mind as we go through this part. Hey, great work, scholars! You finished the first part of the lesson, only one more left. You're doing wonderful. I'm proud of you. Before we move on to that second part, take a look at that lesson question with me. Where is it? It's always at the top of the screen. It says, what are the differences between Hinduism and Buddhism? Well, recall, we just finished talking about Hinduism, how there was no main founder of Hinduism, how it actually grew out of the beliefs of Brahmanism brought by the Aryans, and it's a very complex religion. Now, in this second part of the lesson, we're going to really start looking at Buddhism. And while we go through this, definitely make sure you keep thinking about your lesson question and trying to identify the differences between Hinduism and Buddhism. Let's get started with this second part, scholars. Unlike Hinduism, Buddhism actually has a founder. And the founder of Buddhism is Siddhartha Gautama, and you can see a statue of him right here. Now, Siddhartha Gautama, he grew up in luxury. His family was extremely well off. However, once he left his compound where he lived, he saw suffering. He witnessed it in the world, and that really changed him as a person. So because he saw that suffering, he chose to start suffering as well as meditating in order to find wisdom, of how to solve this suffering that he had witnessed in the world. He became called, or he soon became or took on the name of Buddha, which means the enlightened one. And after that, he began to travel around India teaching others about some of his truths or some of his theories. And some of his teachings are called the Four Noble Truths. And well, let's go through these. The first noble truth says that life is in fact suffering, and that suffering can be physical or it can be emotional. It can be those two different things. The second aspect of his teaching, or the second noble truth, is that suffering he saw is caused by greed, selfishness, and hatred, a combination of those three things put together. The third noble truth is that the way to end this suffering is to end all desires for worldly things. Because remember, he says that suffering is caused by greed, selfishness, and hatred. So to end suffering, you need to end your desire for the worldly things that cause that suffering. And the fourth and final noble truth is that the way to attain enlightenment is to follow the Eightfold Path. The way to end this suffering and to gain enlightenment is to follow the Eightfold Path. Let's take a look at that right now. And as we just said, this Eightfold Path was the way to reach enlightenment. That's the goal in Buddhism. And this was a set of behaviors, this eightfold path was, that included good moral conduct as well as meditation. In addition to that, the eightfold path is also called the middle way, or the middle way to reach enlightenment. And by following this middle way, you can reach nirvana. Now, nirvana, what that is spiritual happiness without negative emotion or fear. That's what he was talking about in regards to nirvana. Well, after he started preaching and after he began spreading his ideas, we did see a spread of Buddhism. And in fact, it soon spread across Asia. Now, the main advocate for Buddhism during this time was Ashoka, who was a Mauryan emperor. Now, he converted to Buddhism after a war or after a battle that he had where he saw 100,000 of his soldiers die in this battle, and he was struck by the suffering that he saw. Seeing those 100,000 soldiers, he converted and began to spread Buddhism around his empire. In addition, missionaries carried the religion to Southeast Asia, countries like Laos and Vietnam. You may have seen those earlier in this lesson. In addition, traders carried it into China, where it then spread to Japan. So it went from India into Southeast Asia and up into China as well as into Japan. Finally, Buddhism evolved into many different sects and is often combined with other religions. So there's Buddhism, but then there's also a combination or other religions that go with it. Now, the key thing here is that in India, Buddhism did not really catch on, despite the attempts by Ashoka. However, it is still a dominant religion in Southeast Asia to this very day, scholars. On the screen, you can see a really excellent example of something called a Venn diagram. And you may have used these in your various studies. And this is a great strategy for comparing and contrasting Buddhism and Hinduism, or two different things. The way it works is you put one aspect, Hinduism, in one circle, and Buddhism in the other circle. And where the circles meet is where the common themes or the common items that they have together. So this is a great way to see the similarities and differences between these two religions. Let's start by looking at Hinduism. Now, these are things unique to just Hinduism. No single ruler, the Vedas, the Upanishads, and a creator god. Now jump over to things that are unique to just Buddhism, where the founder is Buddha. Notice that Hinduism, there is no single founder, so obviously those are differences. They believe in the Four Noble Truths, Buddhism does, the Eightfold Path, and they have no creator god. So these are things that are unique to just Buddhism, and these are things that are unique to just Hinduism. Now, let me draw your attention to the middle of the circles, and this is where they both have meditation, they both believe in karma, and they both believe in reincarnation. Now, what I want you to notice, though, is that Hinduism, there are many different practices and many different beliefs, the same in Buddhism. So this is sort of a general, broad overview of these two religions. So I really want you to know that by looking at this Venn diagram, scholars. But this is an excellent tool to use to compare and contrast and find the similarities and differences between two different things, like I said, that you're comparing and contrasting. A timeline is a great way to synthesize and give a graphic representation of everything that we've been talking about so far. And let's just take a look at a few aspects on this timeline of Hinduism and Buddhism. Now, the first key thing is that the Aryans migrated from the Hindu Kush Mountains in modern-day Afghanistan into India, and they brought Brahmanism, the predecessor to Hinduism. That happened around 1500 BCE. We also see the Upanishads right here between 800 and 300 BCE. Those were written. You see Buddha began to preach his beliefs, and finally you see Ashoka, the great, convert to Buddhism during this time, and he began to try to spread Buddhism throughout India. But I want you to remember that this is not a historical bubble. There are other things going on during this time period as well. One of those things was that Confucius was born in 552 BCE, and he would have a huge effect on the population and on the beliefs in Asia as well.